Okay.
Rolling?
Yep.
Rolling.
Stress, burnout, self-care. This trio is where most women turn to explain or address the effects of the vitality gap. All three are real and important to understand, but their connection to the vitality gap is different than what you might be thinking. Let's start with how you talk about stress because it's so universal. I am so stressed. How many times a week do you say that? You're saying it to your partner, your friend at work, to yourself in the car. It's how you describe your days, and it's become a constant. You're certainly not alone. We all experience a variety of stressors. Some are existential. Your partner might be in the ICU, or a weather event is threatening where you live. And some are elective, but you still carry their weight, like planning a party or leading an important project. And some are just purely extractive, like the 5th revision of a document no one is going to read. But no matter where your stress is coming from, you know you have to manage it. And feeling drowned in it over time brings real consequences, like elevated blood pressure, disrupted sleep, chronic pain, and compromised immunity. Talk with your doctor. They'll make this very real for you. Managing stress will keep you alive, but it can't reach the vitality gap. So let's go to where unmanaged stress will most certainly bring you: burnout. When my kids were small and they were feeling weird, they would say, "My stomach hurts." They didn't know that what they're calling stomach covered several different body functions and maybe anxiety. It gave me nothing to work with. And burnout can come across the same way. "I'm so burned out" is a deeply sad admission. But what does it actually mean? What's happening exactly? And that's the challenge. It's all headline, declarative, but not the full story. And when you're dealing with vagueness like this, you're not identifying what's really happening, or you're pointing to the wrong things you can't change, where you feel trapped. Specifics give you leverage and they let you act. But "I'm so burned out" doesn't take you there. The second problem is we treat burnout as inevitable. Burnout is defined, you're a little too fast there, hon. Burnout is defined as extreme exhaustion. Burnout is defined as extreme exhaustion, cynicism, and a sense that nothing you do makes a difference. That's a lot to see as inevitable. Yet, part of what drove me to this work was how this message was coming through in interviews with high-achieving women. At some point in the interview, each would share a story about burning out, and sometimes it even meant hospitalization or time in the ICU. That's very serious. So no matter what, burnout means everything comes to a stop. The time for recovery means putting your life on hold. And what alarmed me beyond the seriousness of these experiences was the tone. I was hearing it as being too casual, too accepting, as if burnout is a rite of passage, like it's the price of ambition, the cost of choosing a big life. And this is the idea that because you're ambitious, burnout is just going to happen. If you don't want to burn out, you have to dial back your ambition. Reject that. Remember that you have agency. And because you have agency, burnout is not the price of ambition. The third problem is missing the fact that burnout is an end-stage diagnosis. If burnout is the only signal you're watching for, you're waiting too long. You know, the vitality gap is an early warning system that gives you the ability to preempt the signs of burning out, let alone burnout itself. So when you pay attention to the vitality gap, you have the capacity you require, leaving burnout completely out of the picture. I've experienced life with the vitality gap open wide. Let me bring you to a June morning some years ago that changed everything for me. I'd just come home from a workout. A healthy breakfast was on the counter in my sun-filled kitchen. By any measure, I was taking care of myself, and I was fine. Actually, better than fine. My kids had just finished school for the year, and they were talking about their excitement for the summer ahead. We had planned it carefully, starting in January, coordinating with their friends' families, lining up programs week by week, and that's what you do when there's 10 or more weeks to manage and you want your kids to have fun. And they were excited about the summer and talking about everything they were going to be able to do. And then I opened my email and the contrast hit. I was going to be full on until August. Fortunately, their summer was just what they wanted. Unfortunately, mine was not. I felt a lot at once. I love summer, and I felt a bit of a panic, like I was going to miss it. I also felt frustrated, like everyone else's agenda mattered and mine didn't. And my kids' chatter about camp and beach days, which I had orchestrated, was making me feel worse. That's kind of hard to admit. And then I said something almost as a reflex. Hey, kids, you know it's my summer too, right? Their little heads nodded with expressions that showed confusion as to why I would even ask the question. And of course, I was talking to myself more than those two. But there was a truth. What was so simple for them to accept was very difficult for me to say. And what that moment crystallized was that the only thing standing between me and what I wanted from the summer was my own decision to make it happen. And really nothing was standing in my way. It wasn't like I could take the summer off, but I didn't need to feel that limited. I had been telling myself a story about constraint that was not accurate. My obligations were very real, but the story that I had no room for what I wanted and needed wasn't true. I had written that myself. I had overcranked my ambition, competence, and discipline. I wanted to feel like my life included me, not just as the person making it all work, but someone whose experience of the summer actually mattered. I was experiencing the vitality gap wide open. The signals from my vitality reserves were completely ignored. I just didn't have a construct to work with yet. I wasn't burned out, my self-care was solid, and neither could clarify what I was actually feeling. So let's take a look at self-care and why it wasn't enough to protect me from the vitality gap. Like we did with burnout, I want to ground this conversation about self-care with a definition. So overused and misused that none of us is sure what the other person is even saying anymore. This is a definition used by the World Health Organization. Self-care is a practical, person-centered set of activities that we should all be undertaking to maintain our health, wellness, and well-being. Self-care is foundational. Remember, you're a renewable resource, and self-care is how you renew yourself. The words in the WHO description are simple, and when you hear them, it's clear that it's not optional, and it's definitely not a luxury. And yet, many women act as if it is. They shortchange self-care and fail to address their most basic needs. And that heroic image of women spending the majority of their lives playing through the pain, self-sacrificing beyond measure, has shaped the thinking of women for generations. And it might be convincing you that you can always run on less. And with all credit to the women who came before us, I'll say this. In today's environment, that's a bad plan. And this is because the pace and complexity of the extraction you're experiencing, those parallel galaxies that only you see. And when you abandon or underserve self-care, you lack your ability to manage those galaxies. Your performance is compromised. Your doctor can tell you how your health is affected, but the connection between self-care and your performance and your vitality is very clear, but it's often at the bottom of the list. There are 3 ways I see this playing out. The first is episodic self-care. This translates to getting taped up to get back in the game. You're spurred to action by a gift certificate or a friend who makes a plan, so you book a massage or a manicure, squeeze in a workout. And that's it. One-time deal. These are helpful and they matter, but they're not enough and they're not strategic. They just tape you up. Or you feel like you're doing everything right by booking a spa day, making sure to tell everyone that you're unavailable. And afterwards, you get in the car feeling rejuvenated. It was great. And then you get the first message, or you return to a home in disarray. And in a few minutes, it's all washed away. Consistency is the issue here. Self-care doesn't work without consistency. If you've done the minimum for self-care for a while and then put all of your confidence in a massage to get you back to baseline, you're misdefining self-care. The second is the "it can wait" pattern. I'll get to it when things calm down. After this project, when I have more time. Between now and that imagined future moment, despite knowing better, you let everything you need fly out the window. Proper sleep, eating well, exercise. And of course, this is a flawed strategy because you need a strong foundation when extraction escalates. And that foundation comes from self-care. Or "it can wait" comes through like this. You book a doctor's appointment months in advance, but then your boss schedules an urgent meeting or a family member needs you. So you cancel the appointment, meaning waiting for weeks or months to get back on that doctor's schedule. And that's you letting other people's needs override your health. You're seeing your life as completely inflexible to your foundational needs. And the third is trying to be perfect. If you can't do the full workout, exercise is off the list. The meal isn't balanced, you skip eating thoughtfully. Miss one night of journaling and the whole routine collapses. The answer isn't the perfect routine. It's being consistent enough in the life you're actually living. And that's the key. Balancing the need for consistency with your real life. Many think of one priority when they think about self-care, with sleep. And that makes sense since sleep is often the first thing to go in a fast-paced life. And hustle culture gave you permission to do this, trying to convince us all that we can get by on less sleep. But that was wrong. And now we know it's mandatory as best we can achieve it. So if you did nothing else for your self-care, getting sleep could be life-changing. But nonetheless, getting rested, as we've covered, is not enough to close the vitality gap. In fact, totally nailing self-care is not enough to close the vitality gap. And that's because all the actions you take to support your self-care are foundational. You can't address the vitality gap without proper self-care, but alone it can't fully address the impact of the extraction you experience. And that's why I talk about vitality reserves. They operate at a whole different level. They hold the power to address extraction and build your vitality. They're also protective when you listen to their signals. It's important to recognize that burnout is not a storm that comes out of nowhere, and our vitality reserves send a ton of signals well before burnout becomes a question. That's the time to act. And now you know that self-care is about having a consistent plan that meets your needs and works with your real life. And I shared my June morning story because I know many women find themselves in the same spot I was in, not feeling burned out, taking care of themselves. Strong foundation. But what I was sensing was the impact of extraction. Because I had a strong foundation, I could start to see it for what it was, even if I didn't have the language for it then. I was definitely experiencing the vitality gap. So here's where we are. Stress is pervasive, burnout is real, self-care is non-negotiable. Truly addressing the vitality gap asks more than what these concepts offer. Addressing the vitality gap means you need a way to look at the effect extraction has on you. And there's a question that changes how you will see it, all of it. What you pay attention to, what you do with the information you've been collecting about yourself, and calling stress or overwhelm or just life. And that question is what episode 5 is built around. Once you have it, you'll use it for the rest of your life. That's next. The masterclass is at thefunreset.com.